Red wine ran down my cheeks, into my collarbone, and straight through my favorite silk blouse. Good Cabernet, white silk. A gorgeous combination if you're starring in a laundry commercial. A girl in a tight gold dress stood over me, trembling with rage, her highlighted hair perfectly curled, her voice slicing through the ambient music like a blade. My husband owns this place. I can throw out whoever I want. 50 strangers froze at their tables. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-syllable. For 5 long seconds, nobody in that room drew breath. Every eye was on me, like I was the evening's entertainment. All I could think was, that stain is never coming out. I really, really loved this blouse. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw the glass back. I didn't cry. I picked up a napkin, dabbed my face, blinked the wine from my eyes, and held her gaze long enough for her frozen smile to twitch at the corners. Then I said, the only honest thing I could manage. I hope that helped. I turned to the man across from me, my potential client, and murmured, I'm so sorry about the scene. Then I collected my bag, squared my shoulders, and walked out of that restaurant with red wine dripping onto my heels and whatever remained of my dignity trailing behind me. My name is Ava Marlowe. I'm 34 years old, and the woman who just humiliated me in the busiest restaurant in town, she's my ex-husband's new wife. The restaurant she called her husband's place, I named it, I designed it, I funded it. I spent 7 years of my life building it from nothing. But this story doesn't begin with wine on silk. It starts almost a decade ago, when I was 25, painfully naive, and believed that love plus hard work could fix absolutely anything. I met Daniel Rhodes at a food festival. I had just graduated from design school, full of opinions about light, temperature, and chair ergonomics, absurdly certain the universe had grand plans for me. He was 32, a sous chef at an unremarkable bistro, doing a cooking demonstration in one of the tents. He spoke about braising short ribs like he was reciting poetry. He described balance and depth and sense memory like food could reach into your chest and rewrite your childhood. I thought he was brilliant. We talked for hours that day. His dream was simple. One day I'll open my new place. Not fine dining, not a chain, just somewhere real, somewhere with soul. If you've ever fallen in love with a man and a dream at the exact same time, you know how dangerous that is. Within a year, we were married. 6 months after the wedding, my grandmother died. Her name was Margaret Hale, and she had lived through a kind of hell I couldn't fathom in my 20s. Back in the 70s, her first husband drained their accounts, hid assets, and walked out without warning. She was left with a toddler and a mountain of debt. She rebuilt from nothing as an accountant. Her whole life after that was columns and ledgers and proof. She believed in paper, not promises. When she passed, she left me everything she had, $200,000, her entire life savings. She also left me a warning I didn't want to hear. The first time I introduced her to Daniel, she watched him laugh in that easy, charming way of his. When he stepped into the kitchen to refill our drinks, she leaned toward me and said quietly, men like that are wonderful to have dinner with and terrible to sign paperwork with. I rolled my eyes. You just don't like anyone I date. She tapped her calculator like a gavel. I like numbers. Numbers don't lie. Charming men do. So when I told her, near the end of her life, that I wanted to use part of my inheritance to help Daniel open his dream restaurant, she didn't forbid it, but she did something smarter. If you're going to invest, she said, her voice already thin from illness, then you're an investor, not a patron saint. We're doing this properly. She had her lawyer friend draft a 1-page agreement. Nothing elaborate, no 10-page contract. Just a promissory note stating that Daniel was receiving $200,000 from me as startup capital, and in return, I would own a 45% equity stake in whatever restaurant we opened with that money. 45%, almost half. We signed it at her kitchen table. She had it notarized. She made me take the original and told me to keep it somewhere safe. I glanced at it, saw a wall of legal language, kissed her on the cheek, and tucked it into a folder with old tax returns and greeting cards. Then I forgot it existed. Grandma Margaret died quietly in her sleep 3 years later. I cried until my eyes swelled shut. I missed her voice, her bluntness, the way she could make compound interest sound like a lullaby. What I didn't do was pull out that document. I was too busy building the Ember House. The Ember House was Daniel's dream and my obsession. I designed everything: the name, the branding, the logo, the smoky orange glass fixtures that made the whole dining room glow like perpetual sunset. I sourced the chairs from a warehouse to states away. I fought with electricians over outlet placement. I sketched floor plans on napkins at 2 in the morning. I built the website myself when we couldn't afford a developer. I ran social media, wrote the menu descriptions, negotiated with printers, and hand-painted the opening soon sign in the window. I did not take a salary. We couldn't afford it. And besides, it's our place, I'd say. What's mine is yours. I worked 16-hour days for 3 years while the restaurant limped along. There were nights we served 6 tables. There were months when our food costs exceeded our revenue. I maxed out my credit cards to float the rent more than once. I didn't ask for my name on the paperwork. I didn't ask for a title. I didn't even ask for a date night. It was us against the world. I told myself. Then one day, it wasn't. Year 4, we finally turned a real profit. Year 5, a local food critic stumbled in on a Tuesday and wrote a review so glowing that people screenshot it and sent it to friends. Year 6, we knocked down a wall and doubled the dining room. By year 7, the Ember House was on every must-visit list in the city. That's also the year Daniel started working late. If this were a movie, I'd tell you I knew that my gut was screaming, that I found lipstick on collars and strange numbers in his phone. The truth is uglier. I didn't suspect a thing. I only found out because I grabbed the wrong phone when an alarm went off on the counter, his instead of mine. A text appeared from an unsaved number with a heart emoji beside it. Last night was perfect. Can't wait until it's just us. See, I opened the thread with trembling fingers. Her name was Chloe, 24, blonde, one of the servers at the Ember House. She'd started less than a year ago. Our restaurant. That's still what I called it in my head. When I confronted him, he didn't bother to deny it. We've grown apart. Ever, he said, like he was explaining a weather pattern. We want different things now. This just happened. He told me it wasn't my fault, which is something people only say when they know exactly whose fault it is and don't want to feel bad about it. He filed for divorce a month later. His lawyer was slick, expensive, and clearly accustomed to winning. Mine wasn't. I hired the best I could afford, which meant someone kind, overworked, and completely outgunned. When it came to dividing assets, the restaurant was the only real thing on a table. No children, no vacation home, just the Ember House and a modest suburban house we'd bought before the restaurant became successful. Daniel's financial disclosures showed that the Ember House was barely scraping by. According to him, profit hovered around $25,000 a year. On paper, it looked like a high-risk, low-return business that might not survive the next recession. I stared at those numbers in court and felt like I was hallucinating. I had seen our reservations. I watched us turn tables 3 times a night. I'd been there when we expanded the bar because we couldn't keep up with drink orders. I knew those numbers were fiction, but knowing and proving are 2 very different things. To prove it, I would have needed a forensic accountant. Do you know what forensic accountants cost? At the time, more than 3 months' rent. The cheapest quote I received started at $12,000 just to take a look. I had $600 in my checking account. So I did what a lot of women do in that position. I let it go. I took a settlement, $45,000 cash, in the house with its small mortgage. He kept the restaurant, all of it. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, he married Chloe at a vineyard. I know because I was foolish enough to look at the photos before blocking them. Both. Her caption read, "When God writes your love story." I closed my laptop and went to feed my cat. That was 14 months before the wine hit my face. In those 14 months, I did what everyone tells you to do. I rebuilt, Slowly. I took small design jobs remodeling a dentist's waiting room, consulting on a coffee shop's layout, redesigning a friend's home office. Nothing glamorous. But the invoices went out and the checks came in and my bills got paid. My cat, Mocha, became my most reliable dinner companion. She never told me I was overreacting. She never asked why I was still single. She never once suggested I be more supportive of a man, honestly. Major upgrade. So how did I end up back at the Ember House, sitting in a corner bankhead, trying to pretend the walls and light fixtures didn't feel like ghosts? One word: work. A few weeks before the wine incident, I'd received an email from a man named Elliot Carrington, 58, owner of a small upscale hotel chain. He was renovating a historic property and wanted a designer. If I landed this contract, it would be the biggest of my career. His assistant booked us a dinner meeting at the most talked about restaurant in town. I didn't realize where I was going until the rideshare pulled up and I saw the sign glowing above the door. The Ember House. My stomach dropped through the floor. Everything okay? The driver asked. I thought about telling him to keep driving. I thought about claiming food poisoning, rescheduling, inventing any excuse not to walk through that door. But I couldn't afford to lose this client because of my past debt, so I swallowed my pride, smoothed my blouse, and walked inside. I asked the host for a quiet corner table and prayed I could survive 90 minutes unnoticed. For the first hour, it worked. Elliot was warm, charming in an old-school way, and genuinely interested in my portfolio. Then someone at the hostess stand must have shown the reservation list to Chloe. Later, I learned she developed the habit of scanning it every night, watching for my name the way some women stalk their boyfriends' exes on social media. She recognized me immediately. She waited. I realized afterward. For maximum impact, when Elliot was laughing at something I'd said, when my guard was completely down. She arrived at the table wearing a bright hostess smile that never reached her eyes. Hi there. Just wanted to make sure everything is to your liking. Enjoying our restaurant? Our restaurant? I swallowed. The food is excellent. Thank you. You've got some nerve, she said, smile still frozen in place. Showing up here like this? Elliot shifted in his seat, sensing the tension. I'm here for a business meeting, I said evenly. I didn't choose the location. You always have an excuse, don't you? Her voice rose. Still trying to cling to what isn't yours. Still obsessed with my husband. She picked up my wine glass before I could react. For a heartbeat, I thought she was simply moving it aside. Then she emptied it onto my face. The entire dining room went silent, Cabernet in my eyes, streaming down my neck. I could have made a scene. I could have screamed that I built this place, that my money was in these walls, that she'd married a liar who'd stolen everything from me. Instead, I dabbed my face with a napkin, tucked my wet hair behind my ears, and looked directly at her. I genuinely hope that made you feel better, I said quietly. Then I turned to Elliot. I'm so sorry for this disruption. I'm going to step outside. And I walked out. On the sidewalk, I finally let my hands shake. Elliot followed 2 minutes later. He insisted on paying for my dry cleaning. He asked if I was okay. He told me with a kind of quiet intensity. For the record, that said much more about her than it did about you. It was the first time in a long while I'd seen that expression on someone's face when they looked at me. Respect. I went home in wine-stained clothes, convinced I had moved on from all of this. That night proved I hadn't. The wound was still there, just scabbed over. But something else stirred awake too. Not grief, not self-pity. A kind of hard, clear focus. The video surfaced online 2 days later. Of course it did. These days, if someone sneezes dramatically, there's a camera pointed at them. A diner at the neighboring table had filmed the entire scene. You could see Chloe throwing the wine. You could see me sitting there stunned, then walking out with what dignity I could salvage. The clip went up on TikTok with the caption, "Rich wife throws wine on mystery woman at fancy restaurant." Within 48 hours, it had over 200,000 views. Local blogs grabbed it. Then a couple of news sites. Suddenly we were content. Think pieces appeared about territorial wives and restaurant drama and women tearing down other women. Half the comments called Chloe a queen for protecting her man. The other half called it assault and demanded I press charges. No one knew my name. I was mystery woman, an extra in someone else's story. Then Daniel inserted himself. The Ember House's Instagram account posted a statement. It was polished enough that I could practically see the publicist who wrote it. It said his former spouse had unexpectedly appeared at the restaurant and caused a disturbance. That his current wife reacted emotionally in defense of their family, that they wished her healing and peace. I read it 3 times. In 8 sentences, he had transformed me into the crazy ex, harassing him at his own restaurant. And because he had the platform, thousands of followers, and a popular businessman, I had deleted my social media to preserve my sanity. His version became the official story. My phone started buzzing with messages. My mother, you went there? What were you thinking? Old acquaintances? Hey, saw the article. Are you okay? Maybe it's time to let things go. A cousin I hadn't seen in years texted me a link to some generic how to move on from divorce article with the note. Thought this might help. Nobody asked what actually happened. Nobody asked why a woman who hadn't contacted her ex in over a year would suddenly appear at his restaurant just to cause drama. The narrative was already written. I was the villain. I spent the next week in a fog. I completed my small design jobs. I fed Mocha. I avoided mirrors. I turned off nearly all notifications and stopped answering unknown numbers. I told myself it would pass. On day 8, my phone rang again. The caller ID displayed unknown, and I almost let it go to voicemail. At the last second, I answered. Hello, Aver, it's Elliot Carrington. I braced for what I thought was coming. Given the publicity, we've decided to go in a different direction. Instead, he said, I've reviewed your proposal again. I'd like to move forward with you on the hotel project. I sat down slowly. But that's not really why I'm calling, he continued. Do you have time for coffee this week? There's something I think you should hear. Completely your choice whether to pursue it. I had already lost so much. What was one more conversation? I agreed. We met at a small cafe far from downtown, the kind of place where nobody photographs their food. Elliot ordered his coffee black and got straight to the point. 8 years ago, he said, my younger sister went through something eerily similar to what you're describing. Her name was Laura. She had married a man who ran a string of car washes. When they divorced, he presented the court with falsified financials and swore the business was barely surviving. Laura walked away with almost nothing while he bought himself a boat. 2 years later, Elliot said, she was cleaning out a closet and discovered a loan agreement. She'd lent him the startup money from an inheritance. It was legally documented. She had forgotten it even existed. He slid a business card across the table. Her lawyer took the case on contingency. It changed everything. The card read, Sonia Patel, attorney at law, complex divorce and financial fraud. I stared at it. Part of me wanted to grab it like a life raft. Part of me wanted to push it back and say, I can't do this again. I barely survived the first time. I've spent 14 months trying to move forward. I told him, if I reopen this, I'll have to relive every lie, every conversation, every look he gave me. And what if there's nothing there? What if I just end up looking bitter and obsessed? Elliot didn't try to persuade me. Laura asked herself the exact same questions. She told me the question isn't whether I win, it's whether I want the truth on record. By the time I left, the business card was in my pocket. I spent that night sitting on my living room floor, Mocha purring beside me, the card resting on the coffee table like a ticking clock. The only reason I'd never investigated Daniel's finances before was money. You don't challenge someone's tax returns for free. You need forensic accountants, lawyers who specialize in excavating lies. experts who bill by the hour. All things I absolutely couldn't afford at the time. A contingency lawyer changed the equation. If Sonia took the case, she would only get paid if I won. For the first time since the divorce, there was a door I could walk through that didn't require a check up front. The next morning, with my heart hammering against my ribs, I called the number on the card. Just a consultation, I told myself. Just questions. I prepared for that meeting like I was cramming for final exams. I excavated every bank statement, every old email from our accountant, every scribbled budget note from our early years at the Ember House. I created a timeline of the restaurant's entire life. Lease signed, first customer, lean months, renovations, the magazine review, the divorce, dates, figures, milestones, all on one long legal pad. I didn't put this much effort into planning my wedding. Perhaps that had been part of the problem. I also started a new folder labeled simply Proof. Every receipt, every screenshot, every relevant document went into it. My grandmother used to say, memory is polite, paper is honest. I finally understood what she meant. Sonia's office was not what I expected. No marble lobby, no intimidating glass tower, just a modest second-floor suite above a copy shop with orderly files, a few framed diplomas, and the faint smell of strong tea. She was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed, hair pulled into a no-nonsense knot. She shook my hand firmly, offered me water, and sat across from me with a yellow legal pad. Tell me everything, she said. Start at the beginning. Don't leave out the parts you think don't matter. So I did. I told her about meeting Daniel at the food festival, the dream of the restaurant, my grandmother's inheritance, the endless nights, the affair, the divorce, the viral video, the wine dripping down my face. She took notes, occasionally interjecting with pointed questions, dates, amounts, names, but mostly she let me talk. When I ran out of words, she set her pen down and asked one question. How exactly did the money move from your grandmother to the restaurant? I explained. Grandma left me $200,000. I gave it to Daniel to start the Ember House. We used some for the lease and build out, some for equipment, some for initial inventory. She frowned slightly. Was there any paperwork for that transfer? Any loan agreement? Investment contract? Anything in writing? I opened my mouth to say no. Then something tugged at the back of my memory. An image. Grandma at the kitchen table. A single page. Her insisting I sign a little formality before she'd write the check. I told Sonia about Margaret, how she'd been devastated in the 70s, how she kept every receipt she'd ever received, how she distrusted charm and worship documentation. How, before giving us the money, she had insisted on a promissory note. I signed it. Daniel signed it. She had it notarized, I said slowly. And then I filed it away and forgot it existed. Sonia's expression sharpened. If that document still exists, it could be the key to everything. Do you have any idea where it might be? I moved twice since then, I said. I packed up a storage unit of her belongings after she died. Recipes, photographs, paperwork. If it's anywhere, it's buried in one of those boxes. Then that's your mission, she said. Find it. Don't throw anything away. Call me the moment you either locate it or confirm it's gone. I went home and transformed my apartment into an archaeological dig. Boxes labeled Grandma, Kitchen, Grandma, Files, Miscellaneous. I opened every single one. I found tax returns from the 80s, birthday cards from people I'd never met, a showbox stuffed with recipe cards in her slanted handwriting, 3 furious letters to Richard Nixon she'd written and never mailed. Hour after hour, paper after paper. Twice I nearly surrendered. My back ached. My fingers were coated in dust. Every document I picked up that wasn't the one I needed felt like a small defeat. On Sunday night, at the bottom of the final box, beneath a stack of church bulletins and grocery lists, I found it. A single sheet of slightly yellowed paper, notarization stamp at the bottom. My name, Daniel's name. I sat on the floor and read it aloud. The language was blandly legal, but the meaning struck me like a physical force. This note acknowledges receipt of $200,000 from investor Ava Marlowe as capital for the establishment of a restaurant business. In consideration for this investment, recipient agrees that investor shall hold a 45% equity stake in any such business form with these funds. There was dot in ink. My grandmother hadn't just helped us with money. She had protected my interest. She had required him to promise me nearly half of the Ember House in writing. I pressed the paper to my chest and cried messy, heaving tears that weren't exactly sadness, grief, yes, gratitude. To Dot, she had been protecting me from beyond the grave while I stumbled around believing love was a contract all by itself. Sonia, read the document twice when I brought it to her. Your grandmother, she said finally, was a very wise woman. Then she laid it out for me without sugarcoating. This isn't just about you performing unpaid labor for 7 years, or him being morally bankrupt. Legally, this document makes you a 45% owner of the Ember House from the moment it opened. He never registered you as such. He told the state and the IRS that he owned 100%. He told the divorce court the same thing in plain English. I asked, in plain English, she said. He lied under oath and stole from a business partner. That's fraud. And depending on what the financial records reveal, there may also be serious tax issues. She held my gaze. If we prove that the restaurant earned more money than he disclosed during the divorce, it means he committed perjury and probably defrauded the IRS as well. If it turns out he underreported income on his taxes, that's not a civil matter anymore. That's criminal. Are we talking prison? I asked quietly. Potentially, she said. I don't control that outcome. My job is your civil case getting you what you were legally entitled to. But once we hand evidence like this to the government, we don't dictate where it leads. She paused. You need to consider how far you're willing to go. I thought about the man who had once fallen asleep on my shoulder on the couch. His hand tangled with mine. The one who held me at my grandmother's funeral. The one who brought me cheap grocery store flowers when we signed the restaurant lease. I also thought about the interview he'd given to a local magazine 6 months after our divorce. They had asked if anyone helped him along the way. He smiled for the camera and said, I built this place from nothing with my own two hands, my money, my design, my years of unpaid labor. His nothing. When do we start? I asked. Sonia almost smiled. We already have. Step 1 is petitioning the court to reopen your divorce judgment based on newly discovered evidence and fraud. Step 2 is hiring a forensic accountant to determine what the Ember House was actually worth. Legal battles don't begin with shouting matches. They begin with paper. 6 weeks after I first walked into Sonia's office, she filed a motion to reopen my divorce case. In it, we explained that a previously unknown, legally binding investment agreement had surfaced, proving that I owned 45% of the Ember House. We attached a copy of the promissory note and a sworn statement from me explaining why I hadn't produced it during the original divorce. I didn't remember it existed, and it had been buried in storage boxes. Once that motion hit the court docket, it became public record, which meant Daniel heard about it very quickly. Simultaneously, Sonia brought in a forensic accountant named Martin Greer. He was in his early 60s, moved deliberately, and had the demeanor of a man who had witnessed every variety of financial deception imaginable. Reading glasses perched low on his nose. Soft voice, precise questions. He worked on contingency in cases like mine. People who falsify numbers, he said, tend to get complacent over time. They repeat patterns, cut the same corners. My job is to spot the patterns. We requested discovery, 5 years of the Ember House's bank statements, credit card processing records, tax returns, invoices, payroll reports. Daniel's attorney fought it aggressively. They filed motion after motion claiming it was a phishing expedition and harassment, and an attempt by a disgruntled ex to sabotage her thriving small business. The judge granted partial discovery. Anyway, within days of receiving the documents, Martin called Sonia. I don't want to get ahead of myself, he said, but let's just say you were right to bring me in. He walked us through his findings. on tax returns and divorce disclosures. The Amber House showed annual profits of around $25,000 to $30,000. But the bank deposits painted a different picture. Credit card receipts plus cash deposits added up to significantly more revenue than the tax returns claimed. Supplier payments didn't align with reported costs. Regular cash withdrawals appeared that never showed up as documented expenses anywhere. You see this pattern, Martin said, tapping a spreadsheet. This discrepancy between cash deposits and reported revenue, this is classic double bookkeeping. One set of figures for the IRS and the courts, another for real life. At 10 weeks in, Daniel's lawyer reached out with an offer. They wanted to settle this unfortunate misunderstanding quietly for $30,000. No admission of wrongdoing. I would sign a document waiving all future claims. Sonia slid the email across her desk. I'm not going to tell you what to do, she said. This is your life. $30,000 is real money. It would help. It would mean this is finished. No more hearings. No more waiting. I pictured my credit card statements. The knot of anxiety that formed every month when the bill arrived. I also remembered something my grandmother used to say when someone made her a suspiciously generous offer. If someone is paying you to stop asking questions, the answers must be very valuable. Decline, I said. No counteroffer? Sonia asked. No, I said. If that's what they're offering this early, I want to see what they're trying to hide. Later, a former coworker told me Daniel had smashed a glass against his office wall when he learned died. Refused. Apparently the charming restaurateur had a side he only revealed to people he couldn't manipulate. The real breakthrough came from someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Paula Reyes. She had been the general manager of the Amber House for 5 of the 7 years I was there. She stayed on for another 2 years after my divorce. She had also been abruptly terminated 18 months earlier. She spotted a small local article about my case. Viral ex-wife files to reopen divorce, claims stake in popular restaurant, and called Sonia's office. I think I can help, she said. Sonia met with her first, then brought me into a second meeting. Paula looked older, more gray threading through her hair, deeper lines bracketing her mouth, but her eyes remained the same, sharp and tired and kind. She told us that about 2 years after the restaurant began truly thriving, she started noticing discrepancies. There were nights we were absolutely slammed, she said. Standing room only at the bar, full dining room, our long wait list. I'd close the register, and the numbers wouldn't make sense. Always too low. At first she assumed it was her calculation error, then she witnessed Daniel extracting thick bundles of cash from the till and pulling a notebook from his desk. That notebook wasn't the official ledger, she said. It was his personal ledger. Different totals, different numbers. When she questioned him gently about it, he dismissed her concerns. We're doing some creative accounting, he said, just getting through a rough quarter. When she persisted, he called her into his office and informed her she was no longer a good fit. Security escorted her out. No farewell gathering, no opportunity to explain to staff. I was furious, Paula admitted. I considered going to the IRS, but it would have been my word against his. No documents, just memories. Now, though, she had context, a legal case already in motion, a forensic accountant already digging. She brought us names of other employees who had been paid partly in cash without proper documentation, specific dates. When she remembered the dining room being packed, while official sales appeared suspiciously low, detailed descriptions of the parallel ledger system, most crucially, she was willing to testify to all of it under oath. Martin incorporated her information into his analysis. 14 weeks in, he delivered his formal report. It was devastating, based on bank records, point of sale data, and Paula's testimony. He concluded that over at least 6 years, the Amber House had underreported roughly $100,000 in income annually. That meant $600,000 in unreported revenue. This isn't merely divorce fraud, Martin said. This is tax evasion on a scale the IRS tends to take very personally. Sonia sat me down and outlined my options. Option 1, leverage this evidence purely in my reopened divorce case, negotiate a new settlement, secure my 45% share of the business's value plus back profits, and walk away. Leave the tax implications between Daniel and the universe. Option 2, file a formal complaint with the IRS, supported by Martin's report and Paula's testimony, and let federal investigators do what they do. Option 2 meant relinquishing control if the IRS decided to pursue criminal charges. Prison time was a real possibility. What would you do? I asked Sonia. I can't answer that for you, she said. Legally and ethically, I have to tell you, if we possess evidence of serious tax fraud and fail to report it, that creates its own problems. Morally, this is about what you can live with. I went home and sat with it. I was angry. Yes, humiliated, exhausted, but beneath all that, there was something else I hadn't even realized I craved. A record for so long. The official version of my life had been written by other people. Daniel, his publicist, the gossip sites. They painted me as crazy, obsessed, vindictive. Part of me wanted something colder than revenge. I wanted the truth documented. 2 days later, I called Sonia. Violet, I said, you're certain? She asked. I spent 7 years helping him build that place. I said. He lied to a judge and stole my share. The least he can do is pay his taxes like the rest of us. This is where Daniel panicked. Around week 16. Instead of lying low and cooperating, he went on the offensive. His lawyer filed a harassment lawsuit against me. The complaint accused me of a deliberate campaign to damage his business, of inciting online mobs, of weaponizing false allegations to extort a better divorce settlement. They cited the wine incident as evidence that I had provoked his wife by aggressively inserting myself into their lives. The local press devoured it. Popular restaurateur sues ex-wife for harassment, one headline proclaimed. The comment sections became battlegrounds. Half the commenters said I was vindictive, pathetic, and able to move on. The other half called me a hero for exposing a cheater. Neither side had more than headlines to work with. For 3 agonizing days, I spiraled. What if he won? What if some judge believed his narrative and saddled me with a harassment judgment that would follow me forever? What if I was making everything worse? I called Sonia on the 4th day, my voice trembling. She listened quietly, then said, Aver, innocent people don't typically sue to prevent someone from examining their bank statements. This isn't strength, it's desperation. She was right. Week 18. The IRS officially opened an investigation based on our complaint. That doesn't happen automatically. They receive thousands of tips annually and disregard most of them. But Martin's report, Paula's testimony, and the glaring discrepancies in Daniel's own filings made this one different. An agent issued a formal notice demanding 6 years of financial records, tax returns, bank statements, payroll, invoices, everything. Destroying documents after receiving that letter is a separate crime. Daniel's accountant contacted his lawyer. His lawyer consulted a tax attorney. The tax attorney consulted another tax attorney. From what filtered back through legal channels, the consensus was unambiguous. This is serious. You are in significant trouble. Do not delete anything. While all this swirled, one more person was quietly assembling puzzle pieces. Chloe. She had been living with a man who came home progressively later, who snapped at trivial irritations, who drank more heavily each week. She saw the IRS letter. She overheard the tense phone conversations. Initially, he dismissed her concerns. It's just my ex being dramatic. She's trying to destroy us. But Chloe wasn't entirely oblivious. She had access to Google. She began researching tax fraud, divorce fraud, penalties, asset seizures. She realized that if Daniel went down hard, she would go down with him. Joint assets, joint liability. So in week 22, she did the most predictable thing imaginable. She quietly filed for divorce, irreconcilable differences, no statement, no Instagram essay, just a single line in the court records. The woman who had screamed that this was her restaurant, her husband, her life, vanished the moment there were actual consequences. I wish I could say I was surprised. By week 24, Daniel was a man cornered on 3 fronts. Civilly, he faced a reopened divorce judgment and a compelling claim that I owned nearly half his business. Criminally, he was under federal investigation for tax evasion. Personally, his second marriage was dissolving. His lawyers did what lawyers do in such situations. They counseled damage control, cooperate with the IRS. They advised, if you fight and lose, you risk imprisonment. If you cooperate early, you might receive fines, possibly probation, but avoid incarceration. The catch was brutal. To cooperate with the IRS, he had to acknowledge his actual income, and admitting the true figures to one set of government officials meant every lie he had told in family court was now demonstrably false. Pull one thread, the entire sweater unravels. Approximately 30 weeks I walked out of that restaurant with wine soaking my hair. Sonia called while I was sketching lighting concepts for Elliot's hotel bar. It's finished, she said. He's agreed to a comprehensive settlement. My pencil froze mid-stroke. She explained. In the civil case, we've negotiated a revised divorce settlement, an independent valuation of the Ember House, accounting for its current diminished reputation, puts it at approximately $500,000. You'll receive 45% of that as a buy of your equity, plus an additional sum for back profits and legal fees. Total compensation just under $300,000. Because the business had been dragged through scandal, it was worth less than at its peak, but my share was still substantial. In the criminal matter, she continued, he's entered into a plea agreement with the IRS for tax evasion. No prison time, 3 years of probation, approximately $220,000 in back taxes, penalties, and fines. He would walk free. But his record and his bank account wouldn't escape unscathed. I thanked her. She replied dryly, thank your grandmother. I hung up and sat in the quiet of my small studio, staring at the plant in the corner. There was no surge of triumph. No cinematic swelling soundtrack. Just relief. Like finally setting down a suitcase you hadn't realized you'd been carrying every single day for years. That evening, I celebrated by ordering greasy takeout from a hole-in-the-wall taco place. The salsa was too spicy. The tortillas were slightly stale. It was perfect. No wine involved. 3 months later, the Ember House was sold. The combination of fines, legal bills, evaporated business, and a shattered reputation made keeping it impossible. A restaurant group from another state purchased it for roughly 40 cents on the dollar. They actually reached out to me. We've read about your role in the original design. The email said, we'd love to discuss hiring you to redesign the space under new ownership. I stared at that message for a long time. It was tempting, in a way, to walk back and not as someone's wife, but as the professional I had always been, to overwrite the painful memories with new ones. Ultimately, I declined. Some rooms don't need a second visit, no matter how perfect the lighting. Here's where everyone landed. Daniel now works as a kitchen manager at a mid-tier chain restaurant off the highway, not the executive chef at the most celebrated spot in town, just a man who creates schedules, deals with malfunctioning dishwashers, and ensures there are enough frozen fries in the walk-in cooler. He rents a 1-bedroom apartment. Most of his actual income for the foreseeable future will flow directly to the government. He's no longer the visionary who built everything from nothing. He's just another man who thought he could outrun documentation. Chloe's divorce finalized quickly. Since most of the assets had evaporated, there wasn't much to dispute. Last I heard, she moved back in with her parents. Someone sent me a screenshot of her Instagram. She's selling dietary supplements and posting inspirational Bible verses. I muted the person who sent it. Not every story needs a follow-up. Poller, the manager who was fired for asking uncomfortable questions, filed a wrongful termination claim. With Sonia's guidance and the documentation Martin had assembled, she settled out of court. She mailed me a postcard from Lisbon featuring colorful tiled buildings and the words, "Thank you for helping me finally get what they owed me." Heading to Italy next, She also sent a bottle of excellent red wine. I drank it slowly over a week. Not a single drop spilled. Elliot became not merely a client but a genuine friend. We completed his hotel project together. It won a regional design award. At the ceremony, he introduced me as the woman who transformed my lobby and, frankly, rebuilt her own life in the process. I told him resilience is simply stubbornness plus time. And me. I signed the lease on a small design studio a few blocks from my apartment. Tall windows, one assistant, 2 drafting desks, a coffee machine that actually functions properly. Marlowe Design Studio. Restaurants hire me now to perfect their lighting, reimagine their dining rooms, optimize their spatial flow. The irony isn't lost on me. Every contract bears my name. Every partnership is documented in writing. I maintain 3 copies of everything, one in the office, one in the cloud, one at home. Margaret would approve. About 6 months after the dust settled, I was sitting in a cafe, sketching in my notebook. At the neighboring table, a young woman spoke into her phone, voice hushed but urgent. I don't know, Mom. He says he just needs a little help getting the gym off the ground. He promised he'll add my name later. No, I don't want to seem unsupportive. She ended the call and stared at her latte like it might offer guidance. She reminded me of myself at 25, soft round the edges, convinced that love meant agreeing without reading the fine print. I don't typically interfere in strangers' lives. But as I rose to leave, I caught her eye and said, as gently as possible, whatever you decide, make sure it's in writing, and keep a copy somewhere safe. Future you will thank you. She blinked, startled, then nodded slowly. I don't know if she listened, but walking back to my studio, I realized something significant. I don't think about Daniel much anymore. Not with rage, not with satisfaction. He's simply a character in a long story I occasionally tell when people ask why I insist on contracts. Why I verify numbers twice. Why I never invest based on a handshake. I'm not the version of myself who stood in that courtroom, depleted and desperate. I'm not the woman sitting in the Ember House with wine streaming down her face while 50 strangers watched. I'm someone new, someone I genuinely like. People assume revenge feels like fireworks. Doesn't. It feels like constructing a life so solid and so quiet that the lies other people told about you simply stop. MATT or ING. It feels like waking up, brewing coffee, walking to work you actually love, feeding a cat who commandeers your laptop, and realizing you went an entire day without once thinking about the people who wounded you. That's the real reward. Not their downfall. Your peace.